Mindsets. We all have them, and a mindset can either help you to prosper in life or it can absolutely destroy your life. And that is why I am so excited and fired up today to have with me in the studio Pastor Jabu Zwane. Now, Pastor Jabu is a mindset development specialist, and he is the CEO and founder of the Mindset Development Institute, the MDI. Pastor Jabu, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad that we finally get to sit down. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Gerald. Kind of weird for me calling you Gerald, but anyway. For
whatever you're comfortable with.
My fellow pastor. But anyway, yeah. It's great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I want to start off by just kind of getting to know you a little bit more. For those of the audience that doesn't know you, as I understand correctly that you grew up here in South Africa. You were born in South Africa. You grew up in a small town in the Free State called Lindley. Is that correct?
Yep, you got that right.
Awesome.
Lindley, yeah.
And what was it like growing up in a small town during the apartheid era of South Africa?
Well, small.
Surprise!
Yeah, it's a very small town. Lindley being the town part of it, and then Nta being the township, which then would be where I grew up because that's where the black people, were allocated to live. I mean, it was a typical small town back in the time where, the entire village raised you as a kid. So even though, like many of us, our parents were not around, our fathers were not around, but there was definitely never a lack of adult supervision. And let me emphasize on the adult supervision. So you couldn't just be up to anything without somebody calling you to order or actually whacking you into order. And I mean, for the most part, really, it was great, intimate. A lot of people knew each other. And I mean, I think that was typical of many small towns. There really isn't anything much to say about it.
Well, I guess things have changed now that you've been staying in the city for many years, right? It's quite a different experience now.
For me, it definitely is. But when I go back home...
Still the same?
Hardly anything has changed.
Wow.
Faces have changed. People have gotten older, more, but other than that, as far as patterns and the way of living, still pretty much the same, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's interesting because that's actually quite very much in line of our discussion today.
Yeah.
Talking about fixed and growth mindsets. And interesting, maybe we can get back to that a little bit later regarding small towns and, the way that people think.
Yeah.
The culture that is developed around the small town and the people there. But maybe another question that we can get to, and this one is a little bit out there, but what would you say is the one thing that people most of the time, they have this misunderstanding about you? Like what would you say is that one thing?
I think a lot of people misunderstand me for a Model C.
Oh, yeah.
Or a coconut, if I can put it that way. But I'm not that.
Uh-huh.
I grew up in the Free State, and for me to speak the way that I do is something that I had to learn and develop over the years. So I think that's where people sort of confuse me for somebody that has gone to one of those private schools or one of those Model C type of schools, whereas I didn't. I went to a typical township school and public school. When 1994, when apartheid ended, I was part of the first group of black guys to go into the town school.
Wow.
But it was typically a school that was, the teachers were predominantly Afrikaans. And so they tried to teach in English. And so you can imagine the translation from Afrikaans.
Talk about a mindset change.
A serious mindset change. And so
a
lot of the times you literally had to correct even some of the material that was given to you from the teachers to have proper English. And so, that's what I get confused for a lot of times.
Wow, that's very interesting. I think, because of, I think the way that you have grown and progressed in your own life and the experiences that you have had, it can be easy for somebody that has not progressed in the same way to feel like you have betrayed them or the culture, or like you have become a different person. And I know you speak about that sometimes, and I'm sure we can talk about that. Maybe not today. We will see how if we get to that, but definitely at some point I'd love to hear more about your life experience and what you went through. So if you had, unlimited funding, like there was no limit to the funds that you could get, what is the first thing that you would do with the money?
I would buy my wife a Louis Vuitton handbag.
I don't know if unlimited funds can even cover that.
I don't know how much is the bag these days.
Unlimited is not enough.
But I think honestly, I mean, I would invest quite a lot of money into basic education, especially developmental education. I would actually introduce mindset development as part of the curriculum from a very young age, because I really do believe that is the biggest challenge that we have, not just in South Africa, but pretty much many places I've gone to. It's always about the way that people think that determines what they do with what they have, and eventually what they do with what they, once they become, how do they maintain that status, or how do they not squander that? Because I've found that we may have all the abilities to achieve and to get what we want, but the question is that do we have the way of thinking that can keep us there and help us to progress even further?
That's a very, very interesting point. I think, that's something that we see a lot in South Africa, and there's been actually a lot of research done about that, especially when you look at people that go from a place where they have a lot of lack or poverty, and then suddenly they're pushed into wealth, into a wealthy space or space of a lot of opportunities that most of us, we don't know how to handle that. And instead of progressing, we are actually being destroyed by the same thing that was supposed to be, the dream, living the dream. But that dream becomes very, very quickly becomes a nightmare. Is that study that was done about people that win the lotto, and then within a couple of years, they are actually worse off than before they won all the money. So very good point, talking about introducing it into the educational system. There's a lot of talk these days, especially see on YouTube, about mindset and mindset development, and on LinkedIn. But what would you say, in your own perspective, is a good definition of mindsets?
That's a very good question. And I think definitions for context are very, very important. And the way that I describe mindsets is that these are categories of thinking that lead to a specific outcome in our lives, whether we are aware of it or not. And I think the emphasis is on categories, is that categories is, it can be anything from what's similar, what's relevant, same interest. Like for example, if you're thinking about, let's make a very simple example. I mean, let's talk about colors, right? And we say white. As a white person, as soon as I say white, there's a category of information that is going to form around that term. And until I specifically give you what I want you to focus on, like I say, white cup.
Then
all of a sudden, whatever tension that the word may have brought, it shifts along with the energy of thinking that comes with that word. And I think that's important. And so categories of thinking, it just talks to the complexity of how our thoughts build, and that they build in categories, and that our mind sorts out information in categories. But the key thing being, what is the specific outcome? So when you're not aware of the outcome, the outcome tends to be by default, tends to be automatic. But when you have a specific outcome that you're trying to achieve, then the way that your brain sorts out that information that you may have around that same thing, say about around the same color, that determines how you use that information.
I like what you said, that it is the categories that are formed whether we are aware of them or not, because I think a lot of mindset development is the issue around awareness.
Yeah.
Like being aware of what the mindsets are that you have, and then you're able to identify them, and only then you're able to work on them as a person.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're not aware of those, even though you have them, if you're not aware of that it's an issue, or that this is something that you need to focus on and work on, then you might not be in a place where you can even identify that this mindset is influencing your life.
Yeah. I think awareness is a very good word when it comes to mindsets. In the mindset development program that I run, and I think, again, definition for mindset development is the scientific and the artistic, or we can say the organic way that thoughts develop in our own unique structure. And I think it's important to listen to the specific words that I'm using to craft that definition. The way that thoughts develop scientifically and organically or artistically in our own unique structure. Because that's the uniqueness of our structure is vital to how thoughts develop. And along with that as well is also the unique environment within which we find ourselves being raised, operating, impacting, being impacted. Uniqueness is a very important part of mindsets. Do you know what I mean? And awareness, again, is about what is it that you become conscious of. It's a vital starting point of consciousness. Very, very important. And it's one of the 5 principles that we look at in mindset development. That awareness, it is what you notice, number 1, where you notice it, number 2, how you're gonna notice that, and then why you notice it. Whether it doesn't matter how you arrange those questions. The fact of the matter is that they're all operating at the same time at a very fast rate without you being able to track it. And what you notice is key to what you have been exposed to, or whether it's influenced by what you've been exposed to, along with what you want to achieve, along with what you don't want to achieve. And I think that's such a beautiful word when it comes to mindset development. Awareness. Yeah.
So you mentioned the scientific and the artistic way that structures develop.
Yes.
In our lives. Like, can you maybe just elaborate a little bit more about those two? Like, what is the difference between the scientific and artistic development of mindsets?
Yes. I mean, science, the way as it stands, it's not even necessarily a subject per se, but science is just how things are. It's just the rules that are there, that are standard, that are common, that they stand outside of our involvement, outside of our influence. Like light is light, whether I want to see it or not. Darkness is darkness. When it's cold, it's cold. So science is that ability to it's that ability to what I'm post will fix it later. Science is that process of how things are objectively independent of our involvement, our impact, or even the environment per se. On the other hand, art is very environment specific, and it's also very individual specific. Science is objective, art is subjective.
Okay.
All right. You have unique structure, IQ, personality, emotional intelligence, and then your own specific experience. Even though you may grow in the same room, in the same house with your own brother, your position is different from his. He's at the corner, you are at the door. So even the way you're hearing, the way your mother speaks is completely different. So you're experiencing the same thing, but very different. And so in the end, the way that you're going to process the same information, interpret it, is going to be very, very different. That's art. So art, on the other hand, is, it's less predictable. Science is more predictable laws. Art is not. It's more preemptive. It is more intuitive. If you were to make a comparison between science and art as far as, let's say, thinking, we can say that logical thinking requires art. Science is scientific because it's objective laws. And then we can say that emotional thinking is artistic. And that's why you see that art involves so much emotion. And art is so personal and unique. Nobody knows what Da Vinci was thinking.
Yeah.
People can talk about the emotional feel of a painting, but they're not going to necessarily talk about the emotional feeling of a road. Because the road is more science.
This guy looks like he was angry.
You know what I mean?
Not very straight.
So you're not gonna build a road based on how you feel.
Yeah.
You're gonna build a road based on how everybody else is going to use it.
Yeah, that's a form.
So there's so much more to talk about that, but yeah, that's that. Science subjective and art is more subjective.
I think that just makes me think about the specific topic we're talking about today in terms of fixed mindsets and a growth mindset. And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll give you a moment now to give your own definition of those two mindsets. But many people, fall into the trap of living their lives based upon the scientific development of their mindsets, but without the awareness, like you were saying, and without the artistic side of the development, where there is my own taking into consideration my own environment, what I'm experiencing, and the need for me to take responsibility for myself. If we only get stuck with the scientific side, so I am this way because this and this and this, then we fall into that mindset of being a fixed mindset, and we believe that we can't change it. But maybe you can maybe just talk a little bit more about your definition of what is the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset, that a person can have those two. Like, what is the just a short definition of what you would give to each one of those that's easy for everybody to understand?
I'll simply give the definition based on Dr. Carol Dweck, who did the study over 20 years.
Sure.
Dr. Carol Dweck is a Stanford professor, and she studied three types of people: high performing sports people, leaders, and executives. So she looked at CEOs, presidents, all kinds of different people in the world, and then also got who were very good at sports. And she came to the understanding that there are two domains. The first domain is fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is the idea that all of our traits, performance traits, such as IQ, personality, even physical traits, are fixed at birth, and therefore there isn't really anything much you can do about it. Like, you're either dumb or you're either smart. You either have the pure pedigree DNA, as they would say in sports, or you don't. Like when the talent scouts go out and they go into colleges looking for athletes, they would have those terminologies of a pure breed kind of thing. So the idea is that once the way you're born sort of almost like dictates the outcomes of your life, and there's nothing much you can do about it.
Sure.
The other part of growth mindset is the idea that the very same natural traits of performance, they can be developed through learning, growing, practicing, making mistakes, and you can then be able to determine actually the outcomes of your life based on the effort that you put in. So on the other hand, as opposed to saying things are fixed and this is going to be the outcome, the other one is like, okay, fine. The reality is that these are the fixed situations in my life, but I can find a way to overcome those obstacles and rise above them. So those are basically the two domains.
I love that. I love that idea that, it's kind of the outlook that we can have on life, and it's a decision that you have to make to say, I can either decide that life is what it is, and either you get handed the jackpot or you get handed the a shorthand, and you have to just live with it. Where on the other side, it's that, sure, maybe sometimes you get given the short side of the stick, but you can still decide what you're going to make with it, and you can change. I like you mentioned the word, develop. Like, there is an input that can take place, that I can use what I have to grow and to develop, no matter what situation I am in. So, thinking about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have regarding these two mindsets?
I think, I mean, one of the challenges oftentimes when we separate things is that we have that mindset of either or. You know, the fact is that the fixed mindset. Let me ask you this question: if something is so well pronounced in human beings, why is it? And I think I personally I don't subscribe to the fact that it's entirely negative to have a fixed mindset, or is entirely positive to have a growth mindset. We need to be fixed for different things. That's why do we need science? We need science so that we can have a logical way of processing life without our own human limitations messing it up. You know, or without our own desires coming into effect, and then we want to just do things for ourselves.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. There's got to be something that limits our propensity to go absolutely wild and out of control. Science does that very well. If you think about it, even with the science of the roads, we still have road rage, don't we?
Yeah.
We still have accidents. We still have people's personal interests overriding the importance of observing the common laws, rules of driving on the road, so that all of us can be safe. Unfortunately, some of us don't make it home.
Yes.
We die, right? And that is the danger of not having a fixed situation. So fixed mindset responds to that need for a human being to have a predictable way of calculating how things are going to be, how things are going to turn out.
Wow.
Right? And then on the other hand, the growth mindset is that as much as things are fixed, we have to develop. We have to go beyond where we are because things are deteriorating. So we've got to find ways to improve our road infrastructure, for example. We have to find ways to improve ourselves, our ability. We're talking about evolution. You know, like human beings, we have to go through this process of understanding the changes within our environment.
Wow.
And finding ways to negotiate our way ourselves in the environment.
Wow.
So I think it's not a matter of the biggest misconception is that the two are working against each other.
Yeah, so it's either or.
Yes.
In many people's viewpoint.
That's the thing. And the thing is that if you are too the limitation with fixed mindset is that if you are fixed too much, what are some of the challenges? A lack of flexibility, a lack of agility. All right? You may endure things you shouldn't be enduring. So you can be over-enduring. Although endurance is
That's
good.
An interesting point, yeah.
You know, you can be enduring things you shouldn't be enduring at all because you're thinking, well, this is the end of the stick.
That's what it is, yeah.
And then you accept being mistreated.
Sure.
And you accept being undermined. You accept being shortchanged by life, by people, by the environment you're in.
Wow.
So a lot of your ideologies, for example, such as racism, you know, even xenophobia, or even sexism, whatever you may, they operate on that fixed line of thinking to say, this type of people who look this way, this is how they are.
Yes.
So you try to create a science on what you can see, and then you limit what a person can be. And then we can do the same thing for ourselves.
Yeah.
Where we take in the same ideologies that the environment is communicating to us, and we're saying, because I'm a man, I'm not emotional. Because I'm a woman, I'm very emotional. You know, and then you then depend on those vital scientific factors of who you are as a person. And then you restrict yourself.
I like that what you said, over independence on one side or the other. Like,
Yes.
is it possible for somebody to have like too much of a dependence, over dependence on a growth mindset? Like you mentioned that in the previous question, you said that it is important to have some kind of fixed mindset in certain areas, which is a very interesting point that you made. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way. But do you think that, you know, you can be on the other side of the scale where you are too much reliant on a growth mindset? And what does that look like, do you think, when a person is too much on the side of growth, but they don't have the right proportion of fixed mindset within their mindsets?
Look, I mean, I think growth is good,
Mm.
but you better be careful what you're growing in,
Mm.
because your propensity to grow is there as a human being,
Yeah.
right? I had an injury when I was in the States where I partially ruptured, almost entirely ruptured my Achilles heel,
Yeah.
right? Now, the growth mindset person would be, the growth mindset in me was like, man, you can overcome this.
Yeah.
But the reality of the science was that you better be very careful how you do this. There's
Yeah.
certain scientific laws that you got to follow. Part of it being resting,
Mm.
which I wasn't hearing any of it.
It's like, I don't need
You know,
this.
I got things to go to
Yeah.
do here, you know. And a growth mindset again, you know. And I was like, eventually after like 9 months, I got the message that, dude, you better rest this leg, otherwise
Yeah.
you're gonna be without a leg at all.
Wow.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm.
But then with that, with the science then says, okay, if I am injured and I want to really to heal,
Mm.
what is the scientific process that I got to go through to heal?
Mm.
I've got to rest, I've got to eat right, I've got to do the necessary exercises, and I've got to do them in the right measure.
Mm.
All right. Even if I push myself, I've only got a certain amount to push
Yeah.
myself. If I go beyond that, I might just have a universal injury.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so if I'm overly too growth minded, then I can ignore
Mm.
some of the scientific facts of the process of growth that I've got to go through, and I'm just driving. It's like, for example, positive thinking.
Yeah.
You know, like people say, positive. You know, like, hey, listen, sometimes for you to actually become empowered, you need to literally acknowledge the negativity that exists.
Yes.
Like there's danger, you know, and then there's bad economy in South Africa. There are people who can take your money and they can scam you. And sometimes if you don't know how to communicate, for example, the environment can exploit you for what you're worth. Even if you're working hard, if you don't know how to communicate that you're working hard, you won't get that bonus.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the matter. Because you know, I'm just being positive that my boss is going to see my amazing work.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that some people don't intentionally want to see what, because they don't want to pay you more.
Wow.
Or some, they're just too busy. The reality of it is that they're so busy that they don't actually see that it's you.
Yeah.
Or somebody realizes, oh, listen, he's doing very well, but he's not promoting himself. Maybe I can take his work and steal it and go promote myself. Those are the realities that can happen.
Yeah.
And so being aware of that, it basically means that in my positivity,
Yeah.
I still got to have a healthy dose of reality check,
Wow.
and understand
Wow.
that there's danger. And saying that things are a bit tough right now is good, because it can get you to start moving on how do you become, what do you need to do to be tougher
Wow.
than the situation that you find yourself in.
Hmm.
Positive thinking doesn't work for me very well without credible evidence, you know, that I can get it done. I need to test it out, and I become positive about my efforts,
Yes.
and I become hopeful then about the outcome. And that's my positive mindset. If you just come say to me, listen, confess 20 things that are positive, I'm not your guy.
Tomorrow you're gonna, the money's gonna be in your account.
I'm not your guy.
That's interesting, because you see that a lot where people are so positive or focus so much on the growth mindset that they actually become stuck, because they don't do anything to change their situation, or because they're not, like you mentioned, that when I have a healthy dose of reality, like, I'm not denying the reality of my situation, but that doesn't mean that I'm focused on the negative things. But life is still life, sometimes you have to deal with the fact that this sucks, like I'm not where I need to be. And I think I've seen that even in myself sometimes, where we can, and I think as a Christian especially, we can be so overly enthusiastic. In the church we say that you just have to have faith, but it's like, you have that good mindset, that growth mindset, to the point where you become fixed. You can become stuck because you're not putting in what is required to bring about the change, and you're just thinking that everything is going to happen for you. Like, if I just sit around, it's going to happen to me. So that can be a great challenge. But I think what many of us sometimes we hear about, like for example, maybe we are listening to this and you're thinking, okay, great, I need to have a healthy balance between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. I need to be aware of what my mindset is. But how do we identify like the mindsets that we are operating in? Like, what would you say is an easy way for us to identify those mindsets? And what do you do when you identify, for example, you realize in a situation like, okay, I'm busy operating in a fixed mindset. How do I identify that, number one, and number two, what do I do about it?
Yeah, I think going back to understanding what fixed mindsets are and what growth mindsets are, the model that I use has got these three premises, which are the reality of human limitation, and the fact that, and I didn't mention this earlier on, but I think it's important for me to mention it.
Yep.
What really determines what is one of the key principles in mindset development is the factor of human limitation, the fact that we are limited. Our physical structure is limited. That's why we're dealing with COVID right now. Our vulnerability to diseases, and the second part is locality, right? We can only be here at this time. And even those who are listening to us, they are where they are. And they're hearing the audio, but there are many things going on around them, which determines to what degree they understand or interpret what we're saying. Number three is performance. And performance has got 5 elements to it: ability, competence, capacity, fitness, and confidence. And the other part that I mentioned, that is also the issue of character.
Yes.
And it's like the 6th element of performance.
Definitely upcoming podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that one is like intense. Of all performance, it's huge.
Wow.
And then the 4th element of human limitation is consciousness, which is what we talk about mindsets, right? That's why we have to be educated. And that's why it's about awareness. It's about what we know and what we don't know. And it's about us and how we interpret the information that's happening around us. And the 5th one is not really so much a limitation as actually it sort of illuminates or exposes our human limitation in the most profound way. And that one is about existence. And existence is about time. That the moment that you were born, you're literally starting to die. But also at the same time that you stop growing, you also start to die. So it's like a double whammy.
Talk about an existential crisis.
Existential crisis, exactly. And so time exposes our limitation. Time exposes our locality in terms of distance, right? If you are here, you have to imagine how long it's going to take you to a certain place because you can only be at one place at one time. Time also exposes our limitation as far as performance is concerned. Like this is only you can only do so much in a certain amount of time. And also in terms of it also exposes our consciousness. Consciousness almost transcends time, actually, because it is in consciousness that we can have the memory. We can go back into the past and go back into the future. So for those of us that believe in Christianity, consciousness is the likeness of God's eternal existence in a way where they say that he has no beginning and no end. That he can think of the past and the future and the present all at once. To a degree, our consciousness matches that likeness with which we were created, like God. But at the very same time, the factor of human limitation also determines how much in that conscious state can we process. 20 megabits of information per second, some research says, at a conscious level, we can only process. And then up to 10 million bits of information, Dr. Ben Carson, who's the leading neurosurgeon, I don't know how he calculated that, but he says at an unconscious level, we can process up to 10 million bits of information. So if take 20 or 60 out of 10 million, so that says to you less than 0.1% of the information you're processing at a conscious level. Less than 0.1%. And that's a scary situation.
There's a lot going on.
You know what I mean? So in terms of the fixed mindset, is that's why we need to have certain things that are certain. We have to have certain, because that's important for our presuppositions. You need to have a presupposition, meaning that you have to have a presupposed way of thinking, a frame of processing life, and so that you can be able to then process the unfolding reality in the present. And unfortunately, as the present unfolds, you're not 100% sure what's unfolding. But your presupposition, your presupposed framework helps
Framework,
you to interpret different elements, color, heat, whatever, noise, squeaking tires. If you're driving, then something's happening.
Yeah. Get out of the way.
And get out of the way, or brake, or avoid. You know what I mean? All of that. And so that's why it's important to us to be fixed in a certain way, to think a certain way.
Wow.
But if we're too fixed, then we're not able to go into then the growth. And then the growth then looks at how do I develop skills that can help me to handle the unfolding, unpredictable reality that life is. Because two key things in my mind, I'll close with this. Fixed is about restriction. These are the boundaries that I cannot cross.
Yeah.
Growth is about possibility. Growth is potential. If I stick with fixed, my potential is also limited. If I take fixed and I use that to build a good system of thinking, of processing, of operations, of predictability, then it can help me with my growth.
Yeah.
In terms of the path that I take. So growth is about possibility. Fixed is about restriction. Fixed is about government, what governs the way you think, rules. And then growth is about what develops the way you think. It's progress. It's about going forward.
Wow. That's a very good point. Now, in closing, maybe the last question can be just for you to give just like maybe one or two simple tips on how somebody, maybe I recognize that, okay, I am operating in certain areas in a fixed mindset. Like what are some of the things that you think somebody can do in a very practical way that they can apply starting right now to go from a fixed mindset into a growth mindset?
Yeah. The thing about fixed mindset is that it's always about restriction. It's always about fear of doing certain things and fearing the consequences, the negative consequences. Or I didn't actually complete the thought that I had. You have this overwhelming reality of your inadequacy. Yeah. All right, that you're not enough. That life is really hard and it's harsh, and bad things can happen. People can judge you. You can judge yourself, and therefore you feel shame. Right? For me as a believer, in terms of what that is that it's a shame. It's that reality that something is missing. And the other part of that is that it extends into fear. Fear is about a lack of ability to protect yourself, protect the family, your lack of ability to dominate the environment so that you can be able to achieve the things that you want. Because the environment has to be in agreement with you. Yeah. It has to negotiate. It has to submit to your initiations. Right? And if you're realizing, man, I don't have enough power to direct the environment into my favor, then you have what? Fear. And then fear leads into that insecurity. And insecurity is that doubt, that constant doubt. And eventually you doubt long enough, you stop doing anything further. And so the end result is that you have limited control. And then you also have limited performance. You don't apply yourself fully because you're thinking, what does it matter anyway? The outcome is going to be negative. Right? And then the other part of that is guilt. Guilt is about character. It's that you don't start doubting. Let's say, talk about a fixed mindset that has been formed for us as Christians, you and I as Christians, is that the laws that we subject us, that we believe restrict what we do and questions even our own motives. All right. So guilt, on the other hand, is about the moral laws that you place on yourself to restrict yourself from doing certain things. So the end result is that then you start to condemn yourself. Condemnation is that you start saying to yourself, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve. I've done something wrong. And. So that's the whole. So the way that you identify, number one way you identify that fixed mindset is that how many restrictions, where do you restrict yourself, and how often do you restrict yourself from doing what you think you can do, but for some reason you always find yourself talking yourself out of it. Right? And the one way to overcome that is you don't have to be realistic about where do you lack? What are the actual gaps in your own life, in your own ability, in the environment, in your knowledge? These are all factors that contribute to your performance.
Yes.
In your knowledge, in your skill sets, in your resources, money-wise. Do you have enough money? Do you have enough resources to do whatever you want to do? Like, to be realistic about it and say, okay, well, if I don't have all of those things, to move from saying it's not going to happen to go to the other growth is that, okay, can I save?
Yeah.
All right. If I save, how long? Right. And if I save, how much? And all of those factors are important. Okay. If I don't have enough ability with myself, can I get help elsewhere? Right. This is where you start, as opposed to fearing people judging you, start opening yourself up to the possibility that somebody else out there can be able to help you.
For input.
Do you know what I mean? And growth mindset is really about that. Growth mindset is that you are willing to collaborate with the environment, with the people around you. You're opening yourself up to saying, I need help and I need assistance. And actually, I can do things so much better with people involved.
Yes.
And you find that all the time with a fixed mindset person, they don't like involvement of people so much unless they have full control. So they want to control what other people do and put them into their own boxes and tell them what to do and how to help them.
Yeah. Yes.
But what you then miss out is what the growth mindset person finds is that if I say to you, I need your help, I need to submit to your wisdom. I need to submit to your experience. I need to submit to your willingness to help me. Because as soon as I start putting laws around you, that willingness also becomes restricted.
Yes.
Help
me, but don't help me.
Yeah, help me, but this is how I want to help me.
Yeah.
And so those are very simple. I mean, it's very simple. There's so much I can say, but there's very simple ways of how do I take advantage of the fact that as a human being, I am fixed. And I better be fixed if I'm going to operate in a certain way. But then to move away from that and say, okay, where am I fixed? What am I fixed on? And is it helpful for my progress? If it is not, I have to then say to myself, I've got to go to the growth. And in growing, it's about how much do I grow? It's about when do I grow? It's about for what purpose do I grow? So then you become more mindful of the fact that I have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And it won't be easy, but I've got to open myself up to the possibilities that growth, presents for me.
That's a very, very good tip. I think in a way we have to learn to challenge our way of seeing things and challenge the way that we think about even ourselves or certain situations or our, like you were mentioning, our environment, that things are the way they are, but maybe I need to kind of test, push a bit on them and see which things are really fixed and which things are able to move. And if they are able to move, then how do I move them? Like you were mentioning, to ask that question, what do I need to do? Where do I need to maybe look to find help? To invite the input into my life to be able to change. So I love that idea that, yes, there are things that maybe, when we look at it at face value, it seems like they are fixed. But that should never stop me from kind of pushing back a little bit and saying, okay, you seem to be fixed, but is there a way that I can overcome this? Is there a way that things can change? Allow yourself to dream a little bit in a way, to think beyond just the boundary walls. Like we're sitting in this room, there's a world beyond this, and how can I get beyond this, or how, what would that look like? Definitely, I mean, there's so much more to talk. It's we could go on for 10 hours, but I don't know if YouTube will be happy about a 10-hour video, or even you guys. So I think definitely, we will pick this up again at another time and talk a little bit more about developing that growth mindset, and maybe go even into some other mindsets that we can talk about. But thank you so much for your input today in talking about fixed versus growth mindsets. Now, I'm just very curious before we stop the podcast. Can you maybe just share a little bit more with us about the company, the Mindset Development Institute? Like, what do you guys do, and where can people find out a little bit more about you and what you do?
Yeah. Look, at the Mindset Development Institute, I mean, we focus on building critical thinking mindsets for specific things. Critical thinking mindsets for leadership, one of them. Entrepreneurship. Also, effective communication, is an important part of that. And then emotional intelligence and growth mindsets. And our thing is also about relationships.
Yes.
I'm talking about relationships, not just romantic, but even, work relationships, business relationships, even family relationships. Because, the reason why that is such an important focus for us is the fact that we realize that whatever you do as a person, you are existing in those three spheres. The sphere of a relationship, the sphere of the environment, and the institutional setting.
Yes.
All right. The institutional setting is about the science of where you stay.
Yes.
What are some of the hardcore rules that governs where you come from? And then the environment is that relationship where your personal relationships from a family setting, right, into the environment. The environment is trying to, it takes into consideration everybody's personal rules, and they try to make the culture, you're trying to make common rules that are going to govern us. So, and looking at that as one of the frameworks that we use to help individuals, executives, businesses to understand the environment, to understand what is causing them to think in a certain fixed way, and how they can then dare think of possibilities outside of their fixed way, is looking at those different critical models. I mean, there's we've got over 25 different thinking models that we can be able to apply for different for these various topics that we're talking about. So you can get in touch with us on the mindsetdevelopmentinstitute.com.
Okay.
And get in touch with us there. For me personally, Jabu Zwane, I've got my own personal website, Jabu Zwane, JABUZWANE, or ZWANE for those who are from the US side.
Z.
That's .za.
Yeah.
And I do professional speaking. I do keynote addresses. I also do facilitation and training on those very, very same topics as well.
Yeah.
And then through the institute as well, you can be able to, if you have a big company that you want us to come and look at and see how these can help you to achieve success in those areas of leadership and relationships and entrepreneurship, or to build entrepreneurial mindsets in your company, which is very, very different from management mindsets.
Yeah.
We can also be able to do that. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I think we'll also have the links to all your website, personal and business website, and contact details in the description on the video and also on the podcast notes. So definitely remember to check that out. Also go over to his YouTube profile, YouTube channel, and leave a like there and subscribe. This video will also be featured on his channel, so please be sure to go and check him out there. So thank you so much, Pastor Jabu, for joining us today, and we definitely look forward to another podcast, and who knows where it will take us, and but just to go a little bit deeper into this whole mindset rabbit hole. It's a very big a deep rabbit hole, but it's a very, very important topic for all of us. Like you said in the beginning, that everybody has a certain mindset, and it's so important for us to recognize, what those mindsets are, how they influence our lives, and what we can do about it. Because many people maybe recognize, oh yeah, I have a mindset, but they don't know where to start. Like we've been talking a lot about growth on the channel as well, but and one of the biggest challenges of growth is, where do I even start?
Yeah. So
thank you so much. I love everything that you mentioned today. It was a really informative talk. So I'm looking forward to the next one.
Look, it was a great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really did have a great time talking about this. As you said, it's a very big topic. You cannot be able to cover it in an hour or two.
No.
Even the course that I do for mindset development, I mean, is like it's 40, 50, 60 hours.
Oh.
And even with that, it's not enough.
Yeah.
But the thing that I would just leave as a challenge to all of you today is that, be intentional to study the patterns of your behavior. If you're finding certain outcomes are very consistent, like you always start something, you don't finish it. Whenever you're supposed to start something, you're fearful and you end up talking yourself out of it. Then there is a pattern, there's a mindset there that is informing that. If it's a situation where you're holding back, most of the time it'll be a fixed mindset, and you then identify what is it that you're fixed about that is stopping you from going forward. On the other hand, let's say you're a growth mindset person, but you find yourself studying things going very far, but you don't really succeed all the way.
Yeah.
It could be the fact that you don't have a strong scientific model that helps to guide your growth process. And that's why you end up then overspending your money, overspending your energy, overspending your intellectual capital, overspending emotional energy and spiritual energy, because you don't have a system that can measure how much of yourself you apply in whatever you're doing. And so, so it's, I think the key thing is that it's important that you don't become too judgmental. Don't be so quick to say, I am this or I'm that way. We are multifaceted as people. And it's important then to take note of what's dominant. Where is the disproportion? Because that's where the solution is. Where is the imbalance? Because that's where you got to focus on. And not so much, I'm this way or I'm that way, because we're both at varying degrees for different purposes, in different environments, at different times. Yeah. We're complex.
Indeed. Very complex.
Thank
Very
you.
complex. You're welcome. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody that's watching and listening. Until the next one, goodbye.